But is there any concern that we risk losing people with years of experience like doctors and let's say scientists?
Well, most doctors who work in actual hospitals and medical institutions have to show up to the office. We know that employees are more productive and more efficient when they are working in an in-office environment, and that's what this administration expects, and I think that's what American taxpayers expect. Don't forget, it's the American people who are funding this government, and they deserve people who are actually showing up to work on their behalf.
After research and study, the drones that were flying over New Jersey in large numbers were authorized to be flown by the FAA for research and various other reasons. Many of these drones were also hobbyists, recreational, and private individuals that enjoy flying drones. In time, it got worse due to curiosity. This was not the enemy.
We also want to thank President Trump for the promises he made to us. He said he would secure our borders and that he would never forget about Lakin. And he hasn't. He's a man of his word. We trust that he will fight for the American people. Most importantly, I want to thank our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, because without his sacrifices, Lakin's story would have ended on that horrific day that she was taken from us. But because of him, we can continue living knowing that we will see Lakin again.
Hey guys, it's Jim. And let me just say this, I've had quite the day. But as you could see earlier today, this was my last day at CNN. And I did want to jump on Substack Live here for a moment and say, welcome to my new venture. I'm going independent, at least for now. This is just the beginning, but I wanted to invite you to join me here on this platform as we talk about the day's news, talk about politics and so on. And I do want to, and just in case you missed my closing message earlier in the day, don't give in to the lies. Don't give in to fear. Hold on to the truth and hope. And we'll keep this conversation going. Great to see all of you here. We'll talk some more soon.
They say it was the greatest opening week in presidential history. And I think, couldn't be a hell of a lot better. Even CNN is saying, this guy is amazing. I couldn't believe it. I said, did CNN really say that? Because nobody watches, so nobody was able to confirm it. But it was pretty amazing. Oh, the camera just went off.
Welcome back to the Unregulated podcast. This is episode number 215 here on Thursday, January 30th. Believe it or not, we are only 10 days into the Trump presidency. I'm your co-host, Tom Pyle.
And I'm your co-host, Mike McKenna, and I'm super glad that we're above the Mendoza line and hanging on there. And I'm super glad that we're on day 10, leaving only 1,400 and some odd days left.
I was genuinely worried we would be low on content after we lost Biden and Secretary KJP. But
if we have 10 more days like this, I'm probably gonna have to get a new line of work because this is killing
aging.
me.
It's like I'm aging. So
every week in Trump land is like a year. That's just the way it is.
The new press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, introduced herself by thanking President Trump, unlike the previous press secretary who introduced herself by talking about how many barriers she broke. She's going to be pretty good, I think, up there. She's pretty quick on her feet. She did clarify a few things in her first press conference. As promised, President Trump dished on the drones. Why was it so difficult for the Biden administration to say the FAA was screwing around with drones in Jersey? What's the problem with that?
I suspect it's not true.
Okay, so you don't believe this either?
No.
Okay.
No. Let me tell you why. Right. I'm just a random theory.
That's fine.
There's a nuclear power plant involved in this thing. And the idea that the FAA would be testing something around a nuclear power plant without telling people, that's not how the federal government works. It just doesn't.
Right.
If you're going to be subject to that, usually they paper you for 2 weeks before that. So
all right, fair enough. So we're still there's still no transparency in our federal government.
I'm certain this. I'm certain the FAA was involved in some way, but I doubt that's the entire story. How about if we leave it like that?
Well, she didn't say exactly why they were doing
Right,
what they were
exactly.
doing.
The answer was an answer, but not a complete and thorough answer.
She did take down the concern about the 5-day a week going back to the office thing fairly swiftly. Hey, last time I checked, doctors and scientists went to an office or a hospital to do their job.
Yeah, this is going to be the great national debate for the next 18 months. Like, you really have to be there 5 days? Can you be there 4 days?
Yeah. Very emotional. President Trump's first bill signing was the Laken-Riley Act. That was, of course, Laken-Riley's mom, who got President Trump to draw a little quiver during that part of the speech. So
yeah, how could you not, right? I mean, it's a legitimately tragic story, layered on top of a legitimate terrible failure in public policy. So
100%. Yeah. So, and then lastly, we have some more. Well, not lastly, of course, because Trump's always last, but we have some more competition.
I saw that. I'm so excited.
First, it was Jennifer Rubin and whatever dude she's teaming up with.
I have not picked up any of their recipes, so I
And now Jim Acosta's going independent.
He's going to Substack. I've been on Substack for like 3-4 years, Jim. Where you been, man?
I love how these folks are like, I'm going independent.
I'm going to Substack.
Because you don't have a job.
I'm going to Substack. It's like I'm going to start writing letters to my friends.
We're gonna talk about things, and we're gonna do things, and
I think
join the party, Jimbo.
I think the problem is it Barry Weiss, right, the lady from the New York Times who got basically thrown out, and then launched a Substack, and then ultimately her own paper, and then a college, right? I think she made it look easy because she's such a fun writer, and she's such a good writer, and like the audience was there for her. She's like, hey, I had a couple 100,000 subscribers. I'm just like, all these guys think they're going to get a couple 100,000 subscribers. I'm like, I'd be amazed if Jim Acosta has more than 60 guys who want to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, but she also has some pretty big money backers too, though. That helps a little bit. So.
Cash always helps, man.
And then lastly, some people say it was the greatest opening week. How can you argue with them? Even CNN, it was the greatest. And literally using the phrase opening week, it's just so obvious to if it's not obvious to the world, the entire lens of President Trump is a Broadway show.
I was going to say, how's it playing? How am I playing?
How is it playing? Just if you don't pick up anything from the Unregulated podcast, pick that up. If you want to get something done in this administration, make a splash.
Smell of the grease paint and a roar of the
Figure
crowd.
out how to create a nice dazzling presentation. So
give them the old razzle dazzle them.
On a more serious and somber note, my announcement this week goes exclusively to the victims of last night's tragic collision over the Potomac. 60 plus people gone. My colleague Terry's son was close to and worked with 2 of the victims. And all in all, he had 6 people on the plane that he had worked with. They were coming back from some trip. So Terry's been knocked around pretty hard this year, and this certainly isn't going to help that. So my prayers are with her as well. So
yeah, it looked terrible, and it obviously wasn't any better than it looked.
Yeah, that was the first crash in 12 years on U.S. soil.
It was. I mean,
we have friends who fly back and forth from Wichita quite a bit.
I was going to say the thing is that how many times has everybody listening to this podcast been on that approach in a plane?
Trust me,
dozens, hundreds. I mean, it's.
Plus, that's my airline now because I made the switch.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Anyways, I guess we'll find out more. But what we know is that those people are not coming back, and that's really the biggest news, unfortunately.
Eternal rest unto them.
All right, this happened in 1847. this. Oh wait, I'm sorry. Do you have any announcements?
No, my announcements are obviously not important. Just go ahead and just buzz right.
No. I didn't
it's
mean to.
fine.
No, I didn't mean to breeze through. Come on.
It's fine.
I'm trying to stay on tempo.
I
here.
said
know
happy
you-
birthday. I said happy birthday to my brother last week. That's good enough. That's it.
All right, sounds good. So this happened in 1847, and so it happens a lot. It's not like a big catastrophic thing. I'm referring to something Trump did last week, but this happened in 1847.
On July 30th, on January 30th.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So a little city named Yerba Buena was renamed San Francisco on this day in 1847.
Oh, there you go.
From a local an ordinance, whereas the local name as applied to the settlement or town of San Francisco has been now shall be forward named San Francisco hereto after in all official communications and public documents records appertaining to the town.
Yeah. Any idea what the town was named after? Like how they came up with San Francisco?
Yeah, a weed. No. Yerba Buena was a plant.
Yeah, the San Francisco was named after.
But I don't know the San Francisco. It was the bay. It was the bay was San Francisco.
No, it was named after the mission in the middle of the town, San Francisco. They named it after the mission. This was back when California used to believe in God. Of course, this was back when the Mexicans ran it. Probably a lot better when they did. Anyway, San Francisco mission.
I bring it up because Google announced that it will formally recognize.
Oh no! Come on.
The name changes of Gulf of America and Mount McKinley on Google Maps. Quote: as soon as the Geographic Names Information System (GNIS) is updated.
I hate to say this.
Gulf of America, baby.
I hate to say this, but
GOA.
But the Mexicans have more coastline in the Gulf of Mexico than the Americans.
Yes.
That's just the way it is.
We're just better. We're better, and that's all there is to it.
We need to invade Cuba if we want to get that coastline count up. And you know what?
Cuba's next.
Most of the coastline of the United States on the Gulf of Mexico is nothing to write home about. I know. Everybody send me your cards and letters.
Oh, boy. Here we go.
There we go. I mean, from Naples all the way around to Galveston, it's just
keep talking.
Yeah.
I try to save you a lot from yourself. I don't know if you notice this.
You know how few people actually want to tangle with me on stuff like this.
All right, this happened in 1933.
January.
And of course, it was the beginning of a chain of not so great events emanating from
the banks.
Germany.
Oh, Germany. Kristallnacht. No.
This day, President Paul von Hindenburg names Adolf Hitler
as chancellor, right?
Leader or Führer of the National Socialist German Workers' Party as Chancellor of Germany.
Yeah.
Also in 1933, and I have a video hint for you for this one. This is a good one.
I'm going to need it.
The Lone Ranger. A fiery horse with the speed of light, a cloud of dust, and a hearty hi-yo silver. The Lone Ranger. With his faithful Indian companion Tonto, the daring and resourceful masked rider of the plains led the fight for law and order in the early western United States.
It was pretty obvious.
I'm going to guess that this is on this day William Tell wrote the William Tell Overture was written.
This is the day the Lone Ranger was introduced on radio station WXYZ in Detroit, Michigan. Producer.
Yikes! Television now, I'm told. ABC, so they don't televise the Lions games. So.
Okay, and this also not such a good day in 1948 for our dear friends in India.
1948, there was the British probably shot up a bunch of Indians. I don't know.
No, this was the day that Mohandas K. Gandhi was assassinated in New Delhi. by a Hindu extremist.
Sort of this nonviolence thing has some limits.
It did run into some limits. Okay, and another not so wonderful day in 1972.
Golly, I'm batting zero here.
It's like a pretty bad day. It's like my birthday is a bad day in history for some
January 30th, 1972?
Yes, sir. On this day in Londonderry, Northern Ireland, 13 unarmed civil rights demonstrators were shot dead by British Army paratroopers.
I knew this
in an event that becomes known as
Bloody Sunday.
U2's first song.
It's not U2's first song. It was Bloody Sunday before it was U2's first song. First off, I knew that date was ringing in my head about something. I couldn't quite place it. For that, I'm very sorry.
Which is why I brought it up, of course.
Second,
this is one of my favorite subjects.
Second, there is no such town as Londonderry. There is Derry. And third, there's no such place as Northern Ireland. It is the North. Other than that, we're batting 1,000 on that one.
William Wallace.
He was Scottish. We don't.
Oh, that's right.
They surrender to the English. They speak the language. They speak the language. They have the religion. They might as well be English. There's no difference.
Okay. You want to get into the honeymoon a little bit here?
You can kind of understand why the English have been shooting us for 1,000 years. We're kind of difficult to live with.
Not all of us are. Some of us are.
I'm talking about the Irish. I'm talking about the Sicilians.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me play this clip and get this segment started.
Yo.
Look, the American people really like what they're seeing, at least compared to where Donald Trump started 8 years ago, right? All right, this is Donald Trump's net approval rating. This is Reuters Ipsos. It's among adults. It was taken the first few days of this administration. Look here. Back in January 2017, Donald Trump became the first president in history to start his presidency with a net negative approval rating. Look at where we are now in January 2025. Considerably better at +6 points. That's up 9 points. To borrow a Donald Trump phrase, this is big league. This is a sign that the American people, at least initially, like what they're seeing. And so you see right here, more Americans approve of Donald Trump's job than disapprove. And that is very much unlike what we saw 8 years ago.
Also, this is from The Hill. Trump's getting a little bit of a honeymoon, huh?
Yeah, I think so. Not a huge one, but some. I mean, he's moving out on what he promised he was going to move out on, right? Immigration, the economy, and social disorder. It's a good start. It's the best opening week ever.
It's the greatest. It's the greatest. I have long been an advocate for the strategy of flooding the zone, as you know. And it appears that, others agree, because I think that's what's happening right now. It's working too, right? The media said, "Hey, look, Trump's on his heels. He rescinded his spending freeze. You see, he literally ordered the equivalent of a government shutdown with that executive order, right? It's not like everything's gonna stick, but the point is that while that's being discussed and debated, and the left media is horrified, a dozen more things are moving along nice and quietly through the process.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of organization. The real test of what's going to happen here is in front of us, and there's no telling what's going to happen, right? How's tax reform turn out? How does reconciliation turn out? And truthfully, can you fill a government with the folks you got at hand?
Yeah, understood. But
the start's been pretty solid.
Yeah, and a lot of other things that the media can't focus on because things are moving so quickly include this article from the Washington Post. The Trump administration is offering federal employees a paid resignation option through September 30th.
Yeah,
he sent the equivalent of one of those spam messages from Africa. There's $1 million waiting for you. Just hit resign, reply with the word resign, and you get a buyout until September 30 and you're gone.
Yeah. The thing that nobody really mentioned about this is that's the first time anybody's had capability to email all federal employees at once.
Yeah, and they're not. There's people are suing about that.
Oh, why?
They said literally it's an invasion of their privacy.
To your federal
They
employee.
all work for this guy. Yeah.
You have no expectation. Whatever. Come on, guys.
But it was.
But it tells you something about how decrepit the government is. That like this was a major achievement. Like we can mail it out to all federal employees at once. I'm like, don't you guys all? I mean, you could mail it out.
So 2.3 million federal workers received an email with an offer to be bought out until September 30th, and it expires February 6th.
Oh,
what's the over and under on the number we're going to take this?
No one.
0?
Less than 100.
Wow, you think so? Because why? Because they can't get fired if they stay, and they don't have to work even if they show up to the office.
Yeah, well, first off, I don't know if
the unions are, going to muscle them not to take.
Of course. First off, I don't know if the president has the authority to do this, and if which I don't really care one way or the other. But if you're thinking about doing this, you're going to want more sturdiness than a email. And the other thing is, the only guys likely to take it would be
like
senior guys who are 6 months away from retirement. Or
I was just going to say this close to retiring, right?
You're just like, sure, man. I mean, if I'm going to pull the trigger anyway, like 2 days from now, I'll take that. But the senior guys are going to look at it like, I don't think this guy can actually do this. Like, where's this money coming from, and who's going to sign the check? And
Congress is like, wait a minute, we haven't even issued a budget yet for this year. You can't spend money you don't have.
The funny thing is, of course, is that that those are all good and substantial questions, but the news that dominated the day was not the good and substantial questions. It was he offered everybody a buyout, and everybody in America who's not a federal government employee is like, oh yeah, that's how they did. That's how they do it in my place of work, right? You offer the guys 100%. You're going to fire a buyout.
Again, it's literally it's theater. It's partially good.
It's partially theater, but it has an educational purpose too.
Exactly. That's I couldn't quite get it out. Yeah, you're much better at these things than me, but it's explaining things to people in ways they understand.
Yes,
and everyone makes fun of him for that, right?
I would say 60 or 70% of American workers either are exposed to or understand the concept of buyouts, and he just summarized sort of what's wrong with the federal workforce all in one gesture. And the fact that all the Democrats, I don't think he has authority to do this. Of course, the right answer, if you're the president, is going to happen in a day or two. Great. Why don't you guys give me the authority? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Let's go.
Exactly. Plus, we talked about a few weeks ago, the folks who have not been working there for a year don't have the protections that the rest of the workforce has. And he did that also, basically put them all on notice. But here's something that I think is glorious and an example of something that is easy to do and will stick. This is from Reuters. Trump administration halts environmental litigation, sidelines lawyers. The Trump administration has halted all pending environmental litigation and reassigned 4 career Justice Department attorneys focused on environmental issues. They put them on immigration.
Yeah, why not? It's an aligning of resources with priorities.
It's exactly what he said.
Isn't that what you're supposed to? Yeah, I know.
Yep.
Isn't that what you're supposed to do?
Yep.
It's
great. So
it is a surprisingly large mix of good government stuff in there. That's what surprises me, right? It's not just the 1 years, the idea that the first year guys are going to get tossed wholesale. That's not happening.
They're literally they moved them to focus on immigration.
Yeah,
they were originally working on one led the Environmental Justice Office.
Yeah,
one worked on Clean Water Act cases. These people are not going to be happy.
Well, yeah. So I got that from a friend whose sister's in justice, and that I had to listen to that the other night. I was just like, well, I'm not sure how to say this the right way, but maybe if you guys hadn't spent the last 10 years like engaging in semi-criminal activity, nobody would be trying to reassign you.
Yeah, and the other thing too is there's a lot of things about my job that I don't want to do, and I'm still doing it, right? So
really, what don't you like about what don't you like about your job, Tom?
Having to raise the money every
come on
year to fund it.
Come on.
So, all right, Zeldin is in. The new EPA administrator, Lee Zeldin, confirmed yesterday 3 Dems crossed the line to support Lee Zeldin, Kelly, Arizona Mark Kelly, Ruben, is it Ruben?
Yeah, Ruben Gallego.
Gallego from Arizona, and of course, John Fetterman from Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So, New York Post says Zeldin has an ambitious agenda for the EPA, even beyond undoing years of damage from President Joe Biden in various states, but he'll be consulting lawyers to ensure every move is lawsuit proof, he told the Post in his first interview after being confirmed head of the powerful agency. Actions have to be a result of a process where I am being briefed on the latest research and science and making a decision after the career professionals of the EPA have the opportunity to share their thoughts and research with me. Durability is going to be an important priority for me with the initiatives that I take. So,
yeah, I think
buckle up. This is going to be a job.
I think it's all good. I don't understand why. I don't understand why 40, whatever it was, 44 Democrats voted against him. I really don't. I'm like, what? You guys got to make up your minds. Either you don't like these guys because they're crazy, like RFK, or you don't like them because they're Trump appointees, in which case you should be voting against all of them in equal measure. Or you should say, look, this is a good guy. He's a public servant. He's been a congressman, right? Served in Iraq, served his country. There's literally nothing on his record that tells you he's not going to be anything other than great. Why are you voting against him? I rarely take votes personally, but I thought to myself, oh, how does a guy like Lee Zeldin wind up with no votes? It's just crazy. It's just insane.
Yeah, that's the world we live in now.
That doesn't excuse it.
I'm not saying it does, but it is. I mean, it reflects it.
It's like I said.
How do you run for president as a Democrat if you're voting for Trump's EPA administrator, right?
You get up. If somebody asks you, you get up and say, he's a good guy. He's a public servant. He's doing it right by his lights. That's all you can ask anybody. That's my metric. Is he an honest person who's doing right by how he sees the right?
Oh shucks.
I'm getting.
Look at you.
Do you know one of my sisters? You're
getting all Andy Griffith on me.
One of my sisters insulted me the other day. She described a column I wrote as Capra-esque. I'm like, what the hell?
Did you ask what that meant?
Oh, no, I knew exactly what it meant.
I know you do, but did she?
Oh, yeah, she absolutely knew.
Okay.
I don't think she understood it was an insult. I think she meant it as a compliment, but there it is.
Oops. All right, folks. The jury is in. Gold Bar Bob gets 11 years. This is from Axios. Former Senator Bob Menendez was sentenced to 11 years in prison on Wednesday after being found guilty of federal charges related to accepting bribes that prosecutors said were tied to Egypt and Qatar. The 71-year-old maintained his innocence, but was found guilty on all 16 felony counts and was sentenced along New Jersey businessmen Will Hanna and Fred Diabas, who were also charged in a case per a Department of Justice statement. Menendez claimed a political prosecution outside the New York federal courthouse after he was sentenced. President Trump was right, Menendez said. The process is political and it's corrupt to the core. I hope President Trump cleans up the cesspool and restores integrity to the system. And he said it with a straight face.
If President Trump commutes a sentence or pardons Bob Menendez, I'm never going to say another nice word about him. Bob Menendez is like a representative of everything that's wrong with this country in one package.
It was just golden for him to do that. I've been robbed. I've been framed.
I mean, the other thing
is,
the other thing is,
he's been on the take for so long.
I was going to say the best thing is Who did he?
This isn't even his first case. This is like his third case.
He's the guy's a criminal. The best part is, of course, he tried to throw his wife in front of the bus. And before him, he's a terrible, terrible person, Tom.
Well,
that's all I'm going to say.
Even I don't know what's worse: the fact that New Jersey tolerated him for so long, or that they elected his son to fill his old House seat.
New Jersey is. I sometimes play a game. I ask people, if you could kick one state out, which state out of the union, which state would you kick out or not not admit if you could go back in time? I get Jersey more often than any other answer. Occasionally I get Texas, but for the most part, you get Jersey.
All right. Do you know who the other senator from Michigan is? This is an ongoing theme.
Gary Peters. Gary Peters.
Yes,
it took me a second, which is sad because I actually know Senator Peters. Oh, man.
Saying, I always thought there would be a time that I would step aside and pass the reins for the next generation. Michigan Senator Gary Peters announced yesterday he will not seek re-election to a fourth term next year.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, I don't blame him, right? He's a grown man, and he obviously doesn't want to spend the last 15 years of his useful life chasing around idiot legislation. I will say this about Senator Peters: a good guy, genuinely cares about the United States, and even in the deepest part of the impeachment conversation, was a Democrat that we could talk to and did bring.
Oh, that's a nice bar. It was at least a Democrat we could talk to.
He was a Democrat that we could at least talk to and bring in the meetings, and he would be productive and helpful instead of chippy and useless. I realize that's not much, but you know what? He wasn't Bob Menendez, and he wasn't any of those 40-odd guys who voted against Lee Zeldin. He probably did vote against Lee Zeldin.
Well, that's actually good for the Republicans in the midterm because they're going to have quite a few seats to defend, and so at least they might get another shot here.
We got 10.
I hope, for the record, it's not Mike Rogers.
Easy boy. We got 10 seats now in Michigan. We got like 4 or 5, 6 statewide, and we got 2 or 3 congressional seats going to be live. 2026, Michigan's going to be the center of a lot of attention.
Yeah, I still think that we should have a seat already, but
next, you mean go off the census?
Yeah, no, I think we should have a seat right now. But
we're about 5 or 6 short, and we'll pick up 6 or 7 more next go around. That's why the Democrats have to do all their damage in the next couple of years, because by 32, we're gonna have a built-in margin in the House. Personally, I'm hoping that Michigan runs another cocktail waitress for office.
Maybe old Romney will go back and run. He's got like 3 states he can run in, right?
Seriously. Well, I mean, what's his name? Didn't Biden give his father like a medal of something?
Yeah,
posthumously.
So, all right, Florida special election results as expected. Florida CFO Jimmy Patronis, bearing endorsements from both Trump and Rick Scott, easily won the 1st district special Republican primary. Which is the first step towards replacing resigned Rep. Matt Gaetz. Upgrade?
Can I just stop you there for a second?
Upgrade much?
For Matt Gaetz? You may be asking the wrong guy. Can I ask you a question?
You can always ask me a question.
What kind of state's chief financial officer is nicknamed?
I know,
his name Jimmy.
Jimmy Patronis.
Jimmy Patronis.
Hey,
Jimmy Patronis.
Come on in. Let's do some deals.
Jimmy Patronis sounds like a guy who would give you a tip at the racetrack, not a guy who should be running a state. I mean,
well, he will be our next senator from the 1st district in Florida.
Next congressman.
In the Atlantic. Coastal 6th CD, also as expected. State Senator Randy Fine from Melbourne won an overwhelming special primary election. Like Mr. Patronis, Senator Fine had the public support of President Trump and Senator Scott, among many other leaders. So our new congressman from Florida,
Jimmy and Randy.
Jimmy and Randy.
Sound like male strippers somewhere.
All right. Anything else in the world of politics I may have overlooked, omitted, or failed to bring up? here in the Unregulated podcast political news segment?
Yeah, my friends over at the Republican State Legislative Committee, guys who do the state stuff for the Republicans, they announced, I think, a 7 or maybe 8-figure buy on in Supreme Court elections across the country. Those are
very good.
Those are especially important when it comes to drawing the maps, the census maps for the elections. Right? They're the second guys who get a look at it. Right? Legislatures draw them, state Supreme Courts look at them, then justice. But usually, if the state Supreme Court says it's okay, justice lays off. So that's a welcome thing, and I'm glad everyone's getting ahead of it.
And of course, our regular listeners know we spent a fair amount of time discussing the potential tremendous advantage that the Republican Party could have in the next census, which is a mere 5 years away.
That's right. Well, let me just talk about that. Let's just talk about that for 10 seconds, right? We're undercounted in 2020 by about 5 or 6 votes, right? Depending on who you believe. The migration patterns in the United States look like this, right? Populations fleeing to red states. Fleeing is the word I use intentionally, right? It's a fairly large internal mass migration, not quite as big as the African American migration to the north in the wake of World War II, but pretty close, right?
Yeah, yet another analogy to those tumultuous times, quite honestly.
So Republicans have a chance to, if you correct for 2020 and you think about what the census is going to look like in 2030, we're going to add 20 seats in the House. We're going to add 20 fundamental Republican seats in the House by 2032. Subtract 20 fundamental Democrat seats, right? 20 from the Democrats. You could wind up with the Republicans having 240, 245. That's a big number for Republicans.
That's pretty in this day and age. That's pretty bulletproof in terms of keeping the House, even in bad times.
Speaking as people who live on a 2-vote margin nowadays, man. If somebody looks at you and says, "Yeah, you got 30 votes," you're like, "Okay, I could probably do that."
Get a few things done with that kind of margin.
Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic.
Sure, there's a lot of time between then and now, but the trend lines are still continuing. And your point about the Supreme Court's effort there at the states,
it's
an insurance policy, right?
It's a problem, especially in places like Wisconsin, right, where you have a majority in the legislature, and the governor's got hit. Governor's a Democrat. State Supreme Court's a D+1, right? It's 4-3. It's a little ticklish. The other thing, of course, important is got to elect the right guy in 2028. You wind up with a census that's overlooked by somebody like Gavin Newsom. Who knows what the world looks like?
Yeah. All right. Well, this usually provides hours and hours of entertainment for me. I'm glued to CNBC during the World Economic Forum in Davos, but this one got overshadowed a little bit by the activities in Washington. But of course, there was a moment where the two converged. Here is their fearless leader, Klaus Schwab, introducing President Trump via video conference.
What great honor and pleasure to welcome you back to the Davos community. Just 4 days into your new mandate, we highly appreciate your presence with us today. We wish you all the best as you take on your critical work ahead. The global challenges we face today are monumental. The importance of American leadership and your personal leadership in this regard is fundamental and paramount.
Just talk about Broadway plays. You could not come up with a better villain than Klaus Schwab. The contrast is just breathtaking for Trump. You must salivate at this.
Yeah, I'm not that guy. I think if I got some of that, my first reaction would be like,
he looks
what
like
now?
Dr. Evil. He looks like Dr. Evil.
Klaus von Schwab, of course he's Dr. Evil. It's so bad. It's so embarrassing. Like, dude, just man up. Just tell him you don't like him. Hey, look, I don't like you, but we had to have you on this program.
I mostly just wish all these people would just stop flying there. So
why?
But they don't, and they burn a lot of CO2. I'm guessing this guy did not take a sailboat to Davos.
Who? Klaus?
If we get to true net zero, temperatures will stop going up almost immediately, lag time of only 3 to 5 years. And if we stay at true net zero, approximately half of the anthropogenic CO2 will fall out of the atmosphere in as little as 25 to 30 years. So it's up to us to get this done. And young people around the world are demanding it. The only thing that we may lack in the view of some people is political will. But please always remember that political will is itself a renewable resource. Thank you very much.
Al Gore.
Oh, good Lord. That Southern accent's come out with since he's gotten older.
And his voice is getting a little JFK-ish.
Well, he's 400 years old. I mean, come on, give the guy a break. I'm sorry.
So, you know, his jag about, like, first of all, the only at Davos are we still talking about net zero.
Oh my, seriously, buddy, get the memo. The story's over.
The other cool thing is he literally is like, the youth are demanding it. Well, he's been giving this speech
for
so long
years.
that some of the youth that have demanded this are collecting Social Security checks. At this
The youth
point.
are demanding it.
I mean, the youth have been demanding this for so long that they've joined AARP to get the discounts on mobile phones. That's just glorious.
$1 trillion worth of propaganda shot at this thing over the last 40 years, and literally they have nothing to show for it. I'm like, it's the most colossal waste of time and money in the history of humanity.
They have something to show for it.
What?
They are giving, as I've said in the past, they're giving tremendous amounts of taxpayer money to companies that are very profitable on the stock market and companies that didn't exist before the subsidies and will not exist after the subsidies. So other than that, you're right. Nothing else.
There's nothing to show for it. Literally nothing. Yeah. It's just a transfer of wealth from rich people to richer people, or rich people to sort of rich people. How many years is he going to keep giving the same speech? Truthfully, if Trump had a sense of humor, you know what he'd say next year? I tell you what, I'm not coming on the program unless you get rid of that loser Al Gore.
No, I want to every year. I need my Al Gore.
You need your Al Gore fix, and you're like, whatever happened to Al Gore?
Yeah, there was a special envoy Kerry clip, but it was so boring that I'm not even going to play it. So
really, he didn't insist on the liquidation of the kulaks or anything. It was more of the same.
But there's a very enthusiastic young woman who is excited about the future of transportation, particularly with motor vehicles.
So this is why we talk about mobility, because actually, if you can get people to share a car, you can take out, a lot of cars in the streets. I think it's Singapore where they looked at how they could bring it down to about 40% of the cars if we would use them smarter. And the interesting thing about technology is that it makes sharing easy and fun and not annoying. It used to be a little bit difficult to share. You would have to go in somewhere in the other end of town and get a key, and that's not what you want to do if you want to take your car. But if you can just use your neighbor's car because you have a smartphone and an app and you don't even need to know the neighbor to get into his car, or if you can find ways of carpooling, and this is what technology helps you do, it's much easier and much more fun to share, and you start then thinking completely different about transport and traffic. And I think it's very important that we do not just try to fix yesterday's paradigm, but think about how do we want a city to move.
It's easy and fun.
I
just share your car.
I want to just say just really quick. I want to say two things. First off, I want to thank my relatives who came here from England, and I want to thank my relatives who came here from Ireland. And I just am so, so, so grateful that I live in the New World, that I live in the Western Hemisphere, because these people are morons. It's just that Europe has become just this
you can make
sad
it easy and
shell.
share your car. It's easy and fun. Just grab the app.
This is America.
Your neighbor's going to be like, oh, someone took the car, asshole.
I was going to say, if one of my neighbors took my car, there'd be some gunfire attached to it. Vice versa. If I took his car, he'd be like, hey, Mike.
Someone took my car again.
Hey, Mike stole my car. Super.
And then, of course,
Lord.
every once in a while, the money guys say the quiet part out loud.
The reliance on fossil fuels. But when we set this up at Standard Chartered in the beginning, it was two prongs. One was we've got to do our bit to do the right thing vis-a-vis our clients because they want to transition to a net zero environment, but it requires massive investment. That's what we do. We come up with those dollars. But two is we make money. Right? It's a big business for us.
Big money.
Who is
big
that?
business.
Who's that? Is that
he's like a banker. I don't know.
Is it Brian Moynihan from Bank of America?
I don't think so. He got beat up by Trump in the.
I know. That's what I'm asking.
Big speech, but
they're making money.
I'll find out who it is for you.
Doesn't matter. Like you say, there's always one every year who's like, and keep in mind, there's cash to be made, boys and girls. Yeah, Al Gore would know more about that than anybody. Hey, I'm a little unclear. Who do you sell his cable network to?
Al Jazeera.
Yeah. Did those guys?
Do they have anything to do with oil?
Did those guys make any money off of oil? Those guys?
I don't know. I have no idea. I'm sure that I'm sure he did his due diligence on that.
I'm sure he did too.
All right, this actually might be a good segue. Do you want to talk about this DeepSeek deal?
Sure. Why not? What do you want to say?
All right. This Wall Street Journal. Chip stocks tumble after China's DeepSeek AI models raised doubts over U.S. tech dominance.
Mm-hmm.
DeepSeek said last week that the performance of his latest R1 model was on par with OpenAI, and that the ChatGPT maker released in September. The announcement came after DeepSeek said in a late December report that it used a cluster of more than 2,000 chips to train its other V3 model, compared with the tens of thousands that are normally used for training models of similar size. They said its training cost only $5.6 million compared to the $100 million to $1 billion range cited last year by Dario. And of course, both tech and energy stocks took a tumble because the whole narrative about how much more power we're going to need has come into doubt as a result of this development in AI chip technology, AI technology.
Yeah.
I think it's a psyop by China personally, but
of course it is. Of course it is. They're look, fine for me something that, well, I don't want to be that person, but I'll be that person. Fine for me something that the communist Chinese have invented, right? Developed end to end. The answer is doesn't exist. Let me give you a specific analogy that I think we're looking at. I've been thinking about this DeepSeek thing, right? Sputnik, right? The Russians, the Russians, did the Russians get out of the gate first? Yeah. Did we catch them first? Did we catch them? Yeah, maybe. But what happened is over time, the Russian inability to actually to rely on stealing things doesn't work, right? Because you're always at least a couple of years behind. That's where we're heading on this thing. And the proof of the pudding's in the tasting, right? Russians have never been to the moon, never going to go to the moon, right? The American approach, does it gold plate stuff? Yeah. Does it overspend? Yeah. But when Americans decide they feel like winning something, they win. I get the feeling we're looking at the same thing. And Howard Lutnick said something interesting in his confirmation hearing yesterday. He said that the DeepSeek thing was a consequence of lax export control and lack of tariffs. Now, the lack of tariffs might have been a propaganda thing, but the export controls, I think, is probably right. What he meant by that, of course, was Chinese are stealing stuff. Yeah,
well, they went underneath. They sort of clawed their way through different channels. It's porous, right? So I'm not even concerned about this from the standpoint of power, because if things get more efficient, that's what they're supposed to do, right? And that's a good thing. But the demand for this stuff isn't going to go away, and the fact that President Trump does not want to lose this war, any war with China, but in particular this one. I get it. Like everyone, I think all those companies were valued at anyway. I needed a correction, and that might have been.
I think that's part of it. I think that's part of it. Everybody was getting nervous and figured, you know what? Let's just take some profits here and take a breath. I think that's a lot of it too. The market kind of used it as an excuse.
Yeah. So I'm thinking we're still on a glide path for the conversation to continue to talk about the need for more power. So.
Oh, of course. Don't be ridiculous.
Speaking of ridiculous, thank you for the segue. This is from E&E News. FERC axes pipeline policy statements.
Yeah.
In one of his first moves as the new chairman of the FERC Commission, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, Mark Christie formally killed Rich Glick's pipeline policy statements. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. The funny thing is, everybody in that building wanted those things dead because they were just hanging over. It is perhaps not coincidental that the general counsel left at approximately the same time, right?
And I'm not sad about that either.
Well,
quite frankly,
I have no opinion about it. I would just point out the general counsel. It was his idea to proceed on these statements, on these policy statements, and they were.
He was also the one who was stonewalling all of our FOIA requests. So.
Well, that's what you pay lawyers for, Tom, to stonewall other people. But it overdue, good, glad, unanimous. Even though the Democrats put out a separate statement saying, "Well, we actually still care about this stuff. Just this isn't the right format." Like, okay, if that makes you feel better, good answer.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm very grateful. I'm very glad. It's a good thing.
Yep. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Much appreciated. Now work on some FOIA transparency for me, please, because I can't afford all the lawsuits we had to file to get basic information about how you all over there do your work. That's just, I need to get that off my chest, but thank you.
I appreciate that. I will remind everybody that I have a standing policy preference, and that is every document that the federal government creates should be posted online, unless it's a personnel document or unless it implicates national security.
100% with you on that. In fact, we issued IER, our research arm, the Institute for Energy Research, issued a blueprint for American energy's comeback. And included in that was that very request that we reform some of the ways that the government provides information to the public about the decisions they make.
Yeah. I mean, it's good government. I don't understand why no one's ever suggested it Republican or Democrat. And no one at the federal level has ever suggested it Republican or Democrat. And it's well within everybody's ability. I mean, this is not, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, hey, maybe we technologically can't do it. If it's generated on a computer, it can be posted. It's just that simple. I mean, hell, we can
now send an email to every government employee.
Well, yeah, I mean, we could do that. We post the Federal Register online. I mean, everything. It's insane, literally insane that this stuff isn't posted online. So you don't have to go through the entire FOIA nonsense. You just be like, hey, let me just look that up, right?
Commissioner Glick, if you're listening, we're always happy to have you on the program to talk about whatever you want to talk about. So standing invitation.
You, Jigger Shaw, whoever gets here first. Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, well, as if there weren't enough fires in California, this is from Utility Dive. Moss Landing battery fire sparks calls to improve safety accountability for industry. A fire at the Moss Landing energy storage facility in California destroyed a 300-megawatt battery array, prompting calls for increased safety measures and accountability from local officials. While the cause of the fire is under investigation, sorry, I'm laughing.
Really?
Concerns have been raised about the frequency of fires at the facility and the potential risk associated with indoor battery storage. Despite the incident, experts believe it is unlikely to significantly hinder the growth of the energy storage industry. Okay, you don't really need a forensic team to figure out why.
I was going to ask.
At battery plants.
Really?
It's not that hard to figure out.
Somebody wrote that.
I don't think this one was arson.
Somebody wrote that down. The cause is still under review or like investigation. These stuff like these. Okay. Lithium-ion batteries, right?
Yeah, of course.
Lithium-ion batteries are inherently chemically unstable. They just are. Sorry, gang. They light on fire from time to time. I believe that this facility is not their first fire. So I'm like, I'm fairly convinced this is not going to become a problem. It's not become a known thing or something that the media talks about until like the parking deck at CNN goes up one day because an electric vehicle is caught on fire. That's what it's going to take.
Yeah. Like Superstorm Sandy.
Not hurricane. It wasn't a hurricane.
No, I know.
I know. I just want to point that out
but
real
my
quick.
point is that,
yeah,
when it was flood the subway, it had to flood the subway.
I was going to say when the Carolinas were getting
it
flooded.
goes after your beach house. They don't give a rip.
Exactly. Florida, Carolina, you're on your own. All of a sudden, New York and New Jersey, it's like a national emergency.
Yeah. So not to be outdone, of course, by the renewable fiascos around the world. Here's from LA Times. Boiling point. Farewell to Ivanpah, the world's ugliest solar plant. Sometimes the government makes a bad bet.
I'm sorry.
Case in point.
Did they close Ivanpah? Is that what happened, or what happened? I know
the Ivanpah Solar Project. Maybe you've seen this unsightly, blindingly bright tower when traveling from LA to Vegas in the Mojave Desert. Maybe you've read about birds getting fried to death as they fly through the sunlight directed to the tops of the towers by a field of mirrors. But when state officials agreed to let PG&E and Southern California Edison buy power from Ivanpah 15 years ago, they saw this type of technology as the future of renewable energy. But guess what?
It wasn't.
It wasn't. They were all wrong. And PG&E this month decided to strike a deal with the plant owners to stop buying electricity from Ivanpah, assuming that state officials sign off, which they most likely will. 2 of the 3 towers will shut down. They still owe the federal government, Mr. Shaw, listening? They still owe the federal government $1.6 billion. Still here 15 years later.
Hey, I'm a little unclear. Where was Barbara Boxer on the Desert Protection Act in 1992? Wasn't that her thing? Wasn't she? Of course. Sorry.
Of course.
Yeah, it's the problem with being around for a while. You know all this stuff.
Speaking of money, these are great segues this week. Thank you. Shell writes off $1 billion. This is from investing.com. Shell PLC announced its withdrawal from the Atlantic Shores offshore wind farm project in the U.S., resulting in a write-off of nearly $1 billion. The decision was disclosed in the company's quarterly earnings report on Thursday, marking another setback, air quotes, setback for the American offshore wind industry.
Yeah.
Shell's CFO stated the project no longer aligns with Shell's capabilities or the returns the company expects. As a result, Shell chose to write off the investment and pause its involvement in the project.
It's visible from the shore. That's a huge problem. It just is.
One.
Well, it's one, but I mean, it's probably what's gonna cause it to have like serious problems, because you can see it from the shore where you could if it was built right. If it was a guy built, you're gonna see it. Unlike other offshore things, which are like way offshore. It's you can't put platforms. You can't put oil platforms that are visible from the shore anywhere anymore. It's going to be the same with the offshore wind guys.
Yeah.
Okay, so next time you drive along the coast, the PCH, take a look off Santa Barbara and look at those platforms, because you're looking at an extinct species.
Yeah. Well, who knows? Maybe one day we'll put those beautiful rigs back up.
Big, beautiful American rigs.
I got one more for you on the energy space. This is from Wall Street Journal. Sales of electric heavy-duty trucks are hitting a regulatory wall. Trucking industry execs say the road to electric trucks has become particularly cloudy in California, which has led the nation in moves away from conventional fuels served as a model for other states looking to tighten truck rules. California has rolled back some of its rules because of the new administration in Washington, even as some of the state's zero emissions demands remain in place. The changes have left truck manufacturers and dealers in a limbo as they contend with a requirement to sell zero emission trucks to fleets that have little regulatory incentive to buy the new rigs. The article goes on and on and on. So essentially, California pulled back the waiver request to the EPA for the electric trucks and the electric diesel train conversions, right? Because, quote, uncertainty with the Trump administration.
There's a lot of certainty they're going to reject the waiver request.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty certain to me what they were going to do.
Uncertain.
So, but you remember when the guys who make these engines cut the deal with Newsom, they said, we will enforce, or we will proceed with the deal even if it's overturned in the courts.
Yeah. Yeah.
So does this include that?
I don't think so.
So
only if it's overturned.
Does that mean the deal is off?
I assume the deal's off. The great thing about the car guys, the truck guys, boat guys, all companies. The great thing about all companies negotiating with California, the state of California, is, everybody on both sides is probably not telling the complete truth.
Yeah, right.
The state of California intends to ultimately bankrupt you. That's the bottom line there. And for the cars and trucks and boats, they're like, yeah, if we can figure out a way to wiggle out of this Houdini apparatus you put us into, we're going to do that. I mean, I would feel much better in these press conferences if, like, one of these CEOs got up and said, I think this is the stupidest idea I've ever heard, and we're going to fight like hell against it.
Yeah, it would be nice to hear that. We used to hear that sometimes in business world, not necessarily in car world, but
that's why
we talked about standing with the California waiver. The refinery guys it's not, the DC circuit said they don't have standing, as if they won't be impacted by eliminating gasoline. But this could all be resolved easily if one automaker filed a lawsuit on that stuff, but they won't.
They want to see what's going to happen. They want to see what's going to happen.
They want us to do their dirty work for them.
Well, I mean, GM's been clear. We have two fundamental problems, right? Two fundamental problems, and they're important. One is CAFE. One is the endangerment finding. If you're serious about changing the regulatory structure of how things that move are regulated in this country, you want to strike both of those things. GM wants to strike CAFE, and there's a bunch of people in the Trump administration who want to blow up the endangerment finding.
You're singing our friend Jonathan's song right now, by the way.
I think
he's going to be like, music to my ears.
I believe that particular line of thought is more right than the other lines of thought I've heard.
Sure.
I don't minimize the struggle, but if you're going to fight, if you're going to take casualties, make sure it's for a hill you want.
That's right, and make sure it lasts.
That's right. Make sure it's a hill you want, and make sure you can keep it once you take it.
Yeah. So the irony of this, of course, this truck thing is they're lamenting the fact that there isn't a mandate, right? Like, oh, the big challenge here is we can't force this. Like, that is the thought process that runs through both the California bureaucrats and the truck and the guys who are making these electric engines.
Yeah. I'm still not sure.
Oh, woe is me! If only if only the mandate were in place, we'd be fine.
Yeah.
So
I'm just not sure how I can feel, and I felt this for a number of years. State of California is going to come in conflict with everybody else. I just haven't figured out how it gets resolved yet. The fact that you got 40 states or 38 states who don't want to do anything, and 12 states who are like, large, but there's still only 24 guys in the Senate. Those 38 guys, you should have 75 votes to do something in the Senate to put a lid on California. And for reasons that are partisan in nature, you don't. If I was if I was a Republican strategist, I might push that issue a little bit. Might just say, hey man,
I think we're heading there. I think
we're getting there. But
we've sort of been steering in that direction for a while.
You look at a guy like John Ossoff, who's up for re-election. I think I'd put a circle around. And by the way, I like Senator Ossoff. I mean, I don't agree with him, but I like him. I think he's been a good senator. But I'd put a circle around him, and I'd say, why are you in favor of this? Why can't we blow this thing up legislatively? You should be among the 60 votes helping us do this.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I have a better theory of how to attack this than General Motors does, which kind of makes me sad.
All right. Speaking of sad,
again,
a nice segue. Josh Allen is now 7-6 in his playoff career.
Yeah.
He is 0-4 against the Chiefs and 7-2 against everyone else.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to set aside the fact that the Bills were repeatedly short-spotted in that game. There's no question about it. And if you think I'm lying, I'm going to throw a video in the show notes. But I will say, too, that they lost in a large part because they don't have a consistent impact player in the back end, in the secondary. Their defense is weak, especially the guys that are there now. They need at least 2 new safeties. That's my opinion about where the breakdown is for Buffalo, and it's shared by some I've been chatting with. So I was depressed for a day. I'm over it. It's just a game, but man, it feels like the early 90s all over again for us Bills fans. So
yeah. So Josh Allen is starting to remind me of a guy who he actually physically plays like, John Elway. Right? John Elway was a great player surrounded by some thoroughly average teams who couldn't get over the hump until relatively late in the career when they finally gave him a running game. I get the feeling,
and they have a running game. It was clear in the third period, the third quarter.
Eventually, the Bills are going to get Josh Allen a defense worthy of him, right?
You got to better hurry because
it's not getting that late. He's still a young man. I get it.
I know, but
it's frustrating, and the thing that makes it worse is that the Chief fans who are used to be, I like the Chiefs. I always thought they were a well-run franchise, and I thought their fans were moderately well-informed. And some of my best friends are still Chiefs fans. But I'm starting to get the Cowboys vibe off some of these guys. Like, they're not really that interested in football, but, I get the, hey, Chiefs, yay, Chiefs, go Chiefs. I'm like, odd. I don't remember seeing you at any of the games recently. I had to live with that with the Cowboys growing up. And it annoyed the hell out of me. And
it was, at least you didn't have to deal with the Swift thing too. So
the Swifty thing is unconscionable. I feel terrible.
That's the headline of the show.
I feel
the Swifty thing is unconscionable, producer. That's it.
I feel truly bad for real Chiefs fans because they too know it's unconscionable. They just don't know what to do about it. Like an evil force has taken over their franchise and now controls it. Look, I'll say this. I say this. I write a monthly note. It gets passed around to people sometimes. This last month, it got passed around to some Chiefs fans who proceeded to bark at me about the predictions I made. And, it was like one guy sent me a note like literally 3 minutes after the game was over. I'm like, you might want to look and get a hobby, friend, if you're that tangled up in my predictions. I'll say this advisedly, no football fan who was not a Chiefs fan like in the 1980s, no football fan who has not been a Chiefs fan for some length of time can root for anybody other than the Eagles. Given that Nick Sirianni is without a doubt the worst person in the National Football League, you still have to root for the Eagles because this thing has to stop. It has to stop. It has to stop now.
Well, I was 0-2. Alex and Mike both 1-1 in their predictions. And so I take it you are pulling for the Eagles next week. That's your prediction?
I think the Eagles defense is better than most of the defenses in the AFC. I think the running game, and I think that the Eagles' running game is a lot better than any running game that the Chiefs have seen this year. I think that the Eagles are going to beat them like 31-24 kind of thing. I think Mahomes is going to get his points, but I think the Eagles are going to beat them. And what's the line? I assume the line is like +2 Kansas City, right? Something like that. Producers looking up the line as we're not an official gambling show here.
So I'm gonna say that this is like picking between waterboarding or the rack. For me. I just can't do it. But I'm gonna have to take the rack for the win. I need the Eagles to beat Kansas City. That's where I am.
That's where it is.
So.
Has to be. Hold on.
-1.5.
Yeah. So what did I say? I
said 2.5.
I said 2. I said the Chiefs and 2, right? And he says no.
The good news is we've got it on. We got it on.
It does. You're really picking who's going to win at 2 points, right? Because the Chiefs are not going to lose a 2-point game.
No, of course not.
You got to assume they're going to be at one score or further away from the Eagles. Are going to be one score or further away. Truthfully, I'm super glad the Eagles beat the Redskins because that means I don't have to listen to all the Redskin fans. So it's kind of sad about me in football. It's come down to I'm rooting for people based on like whose fan base I don't want to listen to for the coming week.
Producer, your pick?
Philly.
All right, all three of us are.
So we're all gonna get a chance to be wrong.
All of us are on the Eagle train. And I had a couple more things, but I'm going to go straight to the close because we're running long and it's perfectly appropriate anyways. Here it is.
Listen, we've got to do this. Let me hear you all say ELGLES, Eagles! Let's go, Birds!
For the 215th episode 2 in the golden age of the Unregulated podcast. Let's go, ELGES. Go Eagles!
Her opening week was not nearly as good as the president's.
No, sir. All right. Have a good week, everybody.
Namaste.